So this is kind of a special episode of the podcast. We have Sean Scorvo, who is the Democratic candidate for House District 23. Is that correct?
Correct.
Running against Mike Neerman out here in Bellfountain, Oregon.
Correct.
And so we are currently outside his house, or his property out here in rural Oregon on a goat farm. We're actually outside. You can see the goats behind us. We're actually videotaping this as well if you're watching on the video. Goats, dogs, outside, socially distanced. And so here we are. So Sean, why don't we start out, listeners know who I am. Why don't you just give start with a kind of 2-minute bio of who you are and how you ended up running for this seat.
All right, yeah. So thanks for the intro. And my name's Sean Scorvo, as you already noted, retired physician, currently running an internet service company, primarily focused on Portland and Reno. Decided to run in this district primarily because I was pretty upset that our representative walked out. This is the second session in a row that had occurred, and I figured that our district deserved better representation. Decided to throw my hat in the ring, and of course 2 weeks later COVID hits, and we don't really know where that's going to take us, so it's been an adventure, but glad I've done it thus far. So it's a little bit about me.
Excellent.
How about you?
Yeah, so running for House District 36, which is up in Portland. So similar idea where you are a Democrat running in a very Republican district. I'm a Republican running in a very Democratic district. So I was born and raised in Oregon. I was born in Portland, moved to Bend when I was 7. Graduated from high school there. Went to Corbin University to get my undergrad in math and computer science. Joined the Army, spent 5 years on active duty in the 10th Mountain Division, deployed a couple times with them. And then came back to Oregon, got an MBA from the University of Oregon, joined the Oregon National Guard while I was doing that, deployed a 3rd time with the Oregon National Guard. Then I went to work for Intel as a financial analyst. And I did that for 4.5 years before getting involved in politics. So I started getting involved around about the 2016 timeframe. I've been a Republican since I've been able to vote. But it's always been just kind of like I'd vote and then I would get on with my life. It wasn't until 2016 when we nominated Donald Trump to represent the party that something flipped in me. I can't stand that we nominated Donald Trump. I mean, just the way the guy is, you can't stand him. So I decided I had a choice to make. I could either change my party. I could just get out of politics in general, just kind of take a step back and not get involved, or I could get more involved and see if I could make my one little voice louder, and so maybe we can prevent the party from nominating somebody like Donald Trump in the future. So obviously this is what I chose. I started getting involved in the Multnomah County Republican Party. Through that I got involved with Lori Chavez-DeRemer and her campaign up in Happy Valley area. Knocked doors for her. I knocked doors for Newt Buehler for his gubernatorial campaign. Through that, I met Nick Karlowski, who's the normal co-host of this show, and we've been doing this podcast for a year and a half. And of course, now I'm a candidate for state rep up in Southwest Portland.
So how'd you find me?
Yeah, so that was a funny story. I was on Reddit and a subreddit called Oregon Politics, and your significant other had made a comment on, I don't even remember the topic of conversation, but she mentioned that her partner was running against Mike Neerman. And so I know Mike Neerman. I wouldn't say we're like friends, but we know each other. And I was like, oh, it'd be interesting to talk to this guy because he's running in a very rural district as a Democrat. And so I messaged her, and she put us in touch, and so we got to emailing and decided that we both kind of had the idea of why don't we record a conversation. And so it just kind of worked out. Here we are, recording conversation.
And I have to say that, in your reach out, and certainly in the correspondence that we had subsequent to that, what I saw was a candidate that was in a very similar circumstance, opposite side of the political spectrum, but maybe not so opposite. I do think that there was certainly a measure of kind of middle of the road pragmatism that you have to tack to, I have to tack to. Mm-hmm. And the impression that I've gotten is it's genuine from you. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation and kind of seeing where it goes.
Yeah. Well, so it's interesting you mentioned the walkout. We don't need to talk too much about this because I think this is probably one of the places that we probably differ. So I'm definitely believe in climate change, definitely believe that climate change is a thing that we need to tackle as a state, as a nation, as a world. I see cap and trade as not a solution to climate change, but as a way to add another bureaucratic layer, which then just increases the size and scope of the government. And so when the Republicans walked out to prevent a vote on on cap and trade, I supported it because, and again, this is probably from my right-wing bias, but I've spoken with legislators, I've spoken with people who were intimately involved in that, and to hear their story, they were not being listened to. Their perspective is Tina Kotek and the Democrats were just steamrolling this thing through. It was not thoroughly vetted. It was just, we need to push this through, and there was no talk of compromise, there's no talk of anything, and so they felt like they had no other choice but to walk out. So
I would counter that with, and believe it or not, I would not have voted for that either. I agree that it was a bureaucratic nightmare. You know, they had a number of goals that were put forth that then were going to get pushed to the various agencies to figure out how to make it happen. That's a huge gray zone, and especially in this state where the amount of corporate and PAC money per capita that goes into this state is higher than any other state in the nation. It is a corrupt system, and you can actually walk down people's voting record and see how at times with particular donations. And I saw that actually unfolding as that cap and trade bill was coming through. And that scared me. You know, that's a huge gray zone that can be taken advantage of, and not to the advantage of Oregonians, and certainly not to the benefit of actually achieving the cap and trade goals. So I would not have voted for that. The thing that got me as far as the walkout was concerned was there was really not even a willingness to put forth another plan. I did not hear another plan from the political right. And so I've actually proposed one that I think is going to better meet our goals and also would actually earn money for the state and create jobs. And it didn't take a lot to put it together. You know, it was a few months of going through that. And that's what I expected our legislators. That's not what I saw. So it's one thing to say, no one's listening to me. It's quite another to come forward with a plan, and I would have expected that, and I didn't see it. And the unfortunate thing is there was a lot of business that's been undone, or not done, I should say, over the last two sessions that we're feeling now to the detriment of the state. So it is still pretty upsetting to me, but I agree, cap and trade, not way to go.
Yeah. See, one of the other things we talked about via email before this was PERS. So again, I'm going to show my right-wing bias here, but I see the influence of the public employee unions in this. And so again, from a right-wing bias, public employee unions give money to Democrats. Democrats then vote for things to increase the size and scope of the government. When you increase the size and scope of the government, you add more employees, state employees. More state employees means more revenue to the state employee unions, and the cycle continues. So there's this kind of incestuous cycle of money going on there, and I see PERS as one of those things where there's a problem. There's a $27 billion problem, and getting slashing PERS is not the right answer, but also burying your head in the sand and pretending it doesn't exist is also not the answer. And so, again, right-wing bias. We got some dogs in the back. I don't know if you can hear on the podcast. Right-wing bias is that this is influence from those outside money organizations that are preventing the legislature from making the changes that need to be made in order to benefit the majority of Oregonians.
So, you know, recently, so in 2019, Senate Bill 1049 was passed. It was meant to start to build up the PERS reserves, you know, the unfunded mandate that we've got attached to PERS. I would not have voted for that, even though it is a step in the right direction. But it's kind of an interesting reason why I would not have voted for it. So if you go back historically into how we got into the mess with PERS, this has gone through a number of different legislatures, sometimes Republican-controlled, sometimes Democratic-controlled. And so there's always been a great deal of horse trading to be able to, you know, cinch down the next contract. And what I saw was, people were consistently passing the buck. They were going to, maybe pay a little bit less per hour. It's going to come out of benefits, and that was the Faustian bargain that people placed on that, and that has been on both sides of it. To now get to the point where we realize that you can't just attach PERS to the market and expect that it's going to be stable. We've gone now through 2 recessions, substantial ones that have pretty much dug us a significant hole. Then we get the legislature pushing for the Supreme Court, the Oregon Supreme Court, to decide on this and say, we need to walk this back. It's just not doable. Well, we have a contract with these people. And I think it's pretty disingenuous of the state to stand back and say, well, we need to change the rules. Senate Bill 1049 did the same thing, where this one was approved by the Oregon Supreme Court in August, but I find it similarly disingenuous to set one set of rules and then walk it back when you say, that just doesn't work for us. So my concern is that the state has basically made themselves an untrustable negotiating partner. And going forward, that is not going to put us in a good position for future contract negotiations. So in my estimation, PERS reform has been a mess of both sides playing into it. Then I do agree that we've had a Democratic administration repeatedly try and get out from underneath that, and I don't like that either from the Democratic Party. So my proposal with regards to PERS is I think that we actually need to change the way that we fund the state government. Right now, going back to your comment about the cap and trade bill, with all of these agencies, they've got fees, they've got a number of different revenue generating models that they're opaque. You don't really know where the money goes. You don't know how it's spent. You don't know what the return on investment is for the state. And actually, going back to the interview you did with Alan Alley, I found that really eye-opening. I met with him, I not really met with him personally, but he was part of a roundtable that I attended about 10 years ago. And he said during his time as Deputy Chief of Staff for Kulingoski, when he walked into one of his first meetings, he asked the heads of the various agencies for their business plan. Obviously, he's a businessman, that's the language he speaks. And I think I would have done the same thing. Not one of them could get it. Not one of them could generate any sort of paperwork that substantiated their value to the state. And he was dumbfounded. I was dumbfounded. That, I think, would be the first step in any sort of legislation that I would propose, and just say, we want to see your business plan. Now, we're going to set up a system where we'll help you develop one, but I want to see what the return on investment is. I want to see where all the revenue is. I want to see what every plan that you have in place, what benefit it brings to the state, and then all things are on the table. Those funds would then go into the general fund eventually. And once you do that, every business that I've ever been involved with, once people are really looking at it from a pragmatic point of view, you will find money to be saved. Easily 5%. Businesses I've been involved with, I'm talking 20, 30%. I do not see why the state of Oregon cannot follow a similar path. That's where our PERS reform comes. Doing bills like 1049, Senate Bill 1049, we're just simply exacerbating the problem, and now we're not trustable in any negotiation.
That's an interesting point, and I think that definitely needs to be done. I would say this is one of the things that I have put forward in my candidacy is I have an MBA, I worked in corporate America, now I'm a small business owner. We got my swag on for my garage door business. But being able to look at those business plans and pick them apart, I think, is a skill that we're lacking in the legislature right now. You have a lot of lawyers, you have a lot of bureaucrats, you have a lot of people who've been doing, Kate Brown's a good example where she graduated from law school at 27, got elected to the legislature, and has been in public life ever since for the last 25 years. And, I'm sure she's a great bureaucrat, but just disconnected from what 99% of the state is going through. Maybe not 99%, I don't know. But, most people have to turn a profit, have to just be involved in the community. And while that's not necessarily a bad thing, you need those type of people, but I think we end up with too many of those people and not enough people with real-world experience, timely real-world experience. So, but I think you're absolutely right. There's another, I'm not sure if it was on the Alan Alley episode or a different one, where they're talking about every year each of these agencies will come asking for more money. and you see it might have, I think it probably was the same one where they'll come in and say it's 20 or 30% higher just to maintain the service level. And well, in the corporate world, you have to justify that. You say, okay, well, you did this for $1 million this year. Why do you need 1.3? Tell me where that other 0.3 million is going to. And then you have to justify it. And most of the time you can't. And that ends up getting cut.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that we're not doing that at the state level means that we're not being good stewards of taxpayer money. And that's probably my biggest thing is we have one of the highest budgets per capita in the country here in Oregon. I do not believe that we have the best service per capita in the country. So it's like we have the money going into the state, but it's not being used appropriately. There's a lot of waste. There's a lot. I mean, and I haven't dug into the budget. I don't know exactly where that waste is going, but just by comparing us to other states in the country, you can tell we're wasting a lot of money on stuff. And I think, again, right-wing perspective, I think a strong Republican Party helps that because it puts some checks and balances on the Democratic trifecta that we have in the state. And so I think that, so I support Republicans at the state level because I think we need some pushback on that. And I think that that is going to help. Or even someone like you who has that experience can come in. Or, I mean, I said I wasn't going to say this, but even my opponent, Lisa Reynolds, has talked about being better stewards of taxpayer money. And so she's not backed by the unions, I think they endorsed her, but they were not her first pick. And so she was not their first pick. And so I think she's got another good opportunity to go into the state legislature and, shine some light on some things that some people don't want light shined on.
To her credit and to my potential detriment should I win, some of these things that we're talking about are going to be difficult to push through. I mean, there will be resistance. Mm-hmm. A dirty little secret, when I was younger, I voted Republican. I started off as Republican, but I became...
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, well, I did become a little disenchanted as the years went on, but I agree that there does need to be a balance. Mm-hmm. As long as it's not a social conservative agenda that's getting pushed, there's definitely, the pragmatism and the business approach is valuable. It's necessary. That check has to be there. And in fact, in your podcast interview with Alan, there was one really specific statement in that one that struck me, and that was when he was describing when he launched his semiconductor business. He saved the money with his guys, and they went out. He personally guaranteed his business. I did something similar. Put my home on the line, and that's it's not something that I think that a career bureaucrat can wrap their head around. In fact, that's what he was saying. That they were shocked. They couldn't understand how he had done that, why he had done that. But that's when you're approaching business and you really need to know your numbers, and it's your house on the line. You follow through, and I see a representative in a way. It's their house on the line, so they had better be willing to follow through. And if you don't have that kind of perspective to understand how to do that and when to do that, you're probably not a very good legislator. So, yeah, I agree. There definitely has to be a balance. That balance, from my perspective, does not include the current form of the Republican Party, at least on a national level. But, yeah, that balance has to be there.
Yeah. I've thought about switching registration before.
Really?
This is, again, even in 2016, I thought, this is the party of Donald Trump. Is this a party that I want to be a part of? And I've looked at both party platforms. We've done podcasts on both party platforms. And I find that I'm about 70% Republican, about 30% Democrat. And so the 30% that I am not Republican is all that social stuff that you're talking about. And this is coming from a very conservative Christian upbringing, but all of the stuff basically the entire family values plank that talks about abortion and about LGBT issues and all that. I would just even throw that whole thing out. But I think, so one of my goals here is to kind of pull the party away from that socially conservative and focus more on the financial side, the fiscal conservatism, where you're just, and I don't mean fiscal conservative in just like hack and slash, but fiscal conservative in make sure your money's being used in the best places and treat taxpayer money like it is your money and not just some ethereal piggy bank to be spent wherever you feel like.
Like you personally guaranteed your...
Yeah, like you personally guaranteed your house.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that's kind of what I want. So I tend to be a little bit more small L libertarian in the sense of I don't care who you marry, I don't care who you sleep with, go ahead and have an abortion, go ahead and own guns, but let's talk about the fiscal stuff and rein it all in. So that one of the things that Christine Drazen, House Minority Leader, said on the podcast that I thought was really interesting is you put government in a box and you say everything in this box is the scope of the government, everything outside this box is the scope of somebody else, whether it's the individual or charities or fill in the blank. And so what that allows you to do is focus on the things in that box and make them the best you possibly can. But when that box turns into an amoeba, you are now trying to do too much for too many people, and when you do that, you end up doing nothing for anybody. So I thought that was a really good analogy of the way that I kind of see government, and I think fiscal conservatives see government. But
do you see the Republican Party being able to move off of the social conservative agenda?
We'll see. So this is kind of, we were mentioning before the podcast, and I didn't want to talk about it before we got on air, but it kind of depends on, that's kind of the plan. What my longer term plan is to see if we can do that. So it depends on how I do in this election. The last Republican to run in this district, in my district, was in 2012, and he got 17% of the vote. So I am running on a hard, never Trump, like pro good governance, but leave out all of the social conservative stuff. It's in my voters pamphlet statement. I'm running an ad on Facebook, pushing those agendas. And if I can pull in enough of the independents or non-affiliateds, or maybe even a few right-leaning Democrats, and get up to 20, 25, 30% of the vote, now I have a platform that I can go back to the Republican Party. Also, we have this podcast where we're building my network and building my sphere of influence, that if I can significantly outperform in this election, then I have a voice to go back to the party and say, hey, look, do you guys want to win elections? Do you want to strengthen the party? You got to dump all this social stuff. You can keep believing that in your personal life. That's fine. That's what you choose to do. But as long as it's part of the platform, as long as this is what our constituents or our candidates are sticking to, we're not going to continue. Like, this is the status quo. If I can outperform in Multnomah County with a socially progressive but fiscally conservative platform, and I don't expect to win. The registration disadvantage in my district is 6-1, 6 Democrats for every Republican. So, like, getting 50% plus one is so far out of reach that that's not even like in my radar right now. But if I get 30%, then it gives me a platform to try to make a change.
It's a significant win. Yeah.
So who knows? I'm probably going to get 18, and then figure out what to do from there. But
even 18, I think in the current political environment would be significant for you. And I'm actually, it's just maybe a little bit of blasphemy for my listeners, but I'm rooting for you, because I do think that needs to happen if we're going to cure any of these these issues that are currently just burdening us. The social conservative versus the left-wing libertarian or liberal approach is going to be a constant battle unless we start to find at least a truce and move back to what you're saying, which is government is about setting the rules, creating that box, letting everyone know what the parameters are, and then go forth and prosper within those parameters. And if they need to change them, we do it electorally.
Yep.
But right now, that amoeba it's big. It is spilled out of that box, and it is far-reaching. And I'm not actually sure that the Democratic caucus is going to be open to moving off of some of these issues, because it's currently used as a bludgeon. They've got their own system of fundraising off of the Mike Mearmans of the world. There's a reason that these districts are gerrymandered the way they were. They are meant to raise money for the Democrats, and that is another problem where it's a cynical back and forth game that neither party seems to really be open to solving. They've each got an agenda attached to the status quo.